The smell of melting plastic is something I will never forget. It was thick, chemical, and bitter, filling the grand living room of the estate that used to feel like home. My father, Thaddeus, stood by the massive stone fireplace, his face twisted into a sneer that made him look like a stranger. In his hand, he held Rusty. Rusty wasn't just a toy. He was a clunky, hand-built robot made of copper gears and thick plastic plates. My grandfather had built it for my son, Cairo, just months before he passed away. To Cairo, who was only 5, that robot was his best friend. To my father, it was an eyesore. "It's garbage, Brielle," Thaddeus spat. His voice was cold, like ice hitting a metal floor. "Just like your son, just like you, I'm cleaning up this house before the buyers come. I don't want this junk staining my floors." "Dad, please," I cried, reaching out. Cairo was hiding behind my legs, sobbing into my jeans. "Grandpa made that for him. It's all he has left of him." Thaddeus didn't hesitate. He tossed the robot into the center of the roaring logs. Cairo let out a scream that ripped through my heart. I didn't think. I didn't pause to consider the heat or the danger. I lunged forward and plunged my bare hand into the orange flames. The pain was instant. It was a white-hot roar that traveled from my fingertips to my shoulder. I felt my skin searing, but I didn't let go. I grabbed the melting chassis of the robot and pulled it out, falling back onto the expensive Persian rug. I cradled the smoking toy to my chest, gasping for air. My right hand was bright red and blistering already. Thaddeus didn't even flinch. He just looked down at me with pure disgust. "You're pathetic," he said. He looked at his watch. "The locks are being changed in 10 minutes. I've called security. Since your grandfather was foolish enough to die without a will, everything belongs to me, and I don't want charity cases living under my roof." He stepped over me as if I were a piece of trash he'd missed. My name is Brielle, and that scar forming on my hand was about to become the map to $1 billion my father tried to burn. The rain in the city doesn't feel like the rain in the movies. It isn't romantic. It's cold, sharp, and it smells like wet pavement and exhaust fumes. I sat on the curb 3 blocks away from the estate, clutching a single duffel bag and the melted lump of plastic that used to be a robot. Cairo was shivering next to me. He wasn't crying anymore, he was past that. He was just quiet, which was much worse. My hand was screaming. The blisters were bubbling, and every time a drop of rain hit my skin, I wanted to howl. But I had to be strong for him. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. It buzzed with a text. It was from my sister, Zayla. I hoped for a second she was checking on us, asking if we were okay. "Dad says don't bother coming back for your clothes. He's sending them to a shelter. Also, he changed the gate code. Don't be a stalker, Brielle. Get a life." I looked up at the glowing windows of the mansion on the hill. I could see my father in the library, the light from the fire reflecting in his glass of expensive scotch. He was celebrating. He had finally gotten rid of the disappointments. I looked down at the melted robot in my lap. It was a hideous, blackened mess. The face was gone and the copper gears were warped. I felt a wave of total defeat wash over me. We had no money, no home, and my hand was ruined. "I'm sorry, Cairo," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I'm so sorry." I felt like a failure. My grandfather had always told me I was the bright one, the one with the spark. But sitting on that cold sidewalk, I felt like the spark had been snuffed out by a man who valued a bank balance more than his own blood. I closed my eyes and let the rain wash away the soot on my face, wondering how we were going to survive the night. The motel was called the Sunset Inn, but there was nothing sunny about it. The walls were thin enough to hear the highway, and the carpet smelled like old cigarettes. It was the only place I could afford with the cash in my wallet. After I used a basic first aid kit to wrap my hand in gauze, I sat on the edge of the creaky bed. Cairo had finally fallen into a fitful sleep. I picked up the robot. I wanted to clean it, to see if I could at least make it look like a toy again for him. As I rubbed a damp towel over the charred plastic, I noticed something strange. The heat of the fire hadn't just melted the outer shell. It had caused the plastic to warp and peel away in a specific way. Underneath the stomach of the robot, there wasn't more plastic. There was a glimmer of dull gray metal. I frowned. My grandfather was a genius engineer, the man who built a tech empire from a garage. But why would he put a heavy metal core inside a child's toy? I used a butter knife from the motel's kitchenette to carefully pry away the softened plastic. My heart began to race. It wasn't just a piece of metal. It was a reinforced, fireproof cylinder about the size of a soda can. It was stamped with my grandfather's private seal, a small golden gear. It was a safe box prototype. I remembered him talking about these, containers designed to survive plane crashes or laboratory fires. With shaking fingers, I twisted the cap. It resisted at first, then clicked. Inside, tightly rolled, was a thick stack of high-quality parchment and a small, silver microSD card. I pulled the papers out. At the top, in my grandfather's bold, elegant handwriting, were the words, "The last will and testament of Sela's Vane." I nearly dropped it. My father had spent months searching for this. He had told the courts it didn't exist. He had lied to everyone so he could take the throne. And here it was, hidden inside the trash he had tried to destroy. The next morning, I didn't go to a doctor for my hand. I went to the public library. I needed a computer, and I needed to know what was on that silver card. My hand throbbed in time with my heartbeat as I slotted the card into the side of the library computer. A single video file appeared. I clicked play and put on the heavy headphones. My grandfather's face filled the screen. He looked tired, but his eyes were as sharp as ever. He was sitting in his workshop, the very place where he had built Cairo's robot. "Brielle, my dear," he started, a small smile on his lips. "If you are watching this, it means two things. First, I am gone. Second, Thaddeus has shown his true colors. I knew he would never look at this robot. He sees things, but he never truly looks. He thinks anything without a price tag is worthless." He took a deep breath. "Your father is morally bankrupt, Brielle. He doesn't have the heart to lead Vane Tech, and he certainly doesn't have the soul to care for you. That is why I have hidden my true will here. I am leaving 100% of my estate, my patents, and my company to you and Cairo." I gasped, drawing a sharp look from the librarian. "The document in the cylinder is the only legal copy," he continued. "Thaddeus will try to crush you. He will use the company's money to fight you. Do not go to him yet. He has an army of lawyers who will find a way to make that paper disappear. You must be smart. Use the resources I've left you. Rebuild. And when you are strong enough, take back what belongs to our family." The video ended. I sat there in the dim light of the library, the will clutched in my lap. I wasn't just a homeless mother anymore. On paper, I was one of the wealthiest women in the country. But as I looked at my reflection in the dark monitor, haggard, burnt, and wearing a cheap hoodie, I realized having the paper and having the power were two very different things. I took the bus to a legal aid clinic on the edge of town. It was a small office filled with stacks of folders and the sound of a humming radiator. A tired-looking lawyer named Mr. Henderson looked at the will. He didn't look impressed. He looked worried. "This is a powerful document, Brielle," he said, pushing his glasses up his nose. "But you have to understand who you're fighting. Thaddeus Vane has the top 3 law firms in the state on retainer. If you file this today, they will claim it's a forgery. They will tie you up in court for 10 years. Do you have the money for forensic analysts, for filing fees, for a security team to keep you safe when he realizes you have this?" I looked at my bank balance on my phone, $64. "No," I whispered. "Then you'll lose," he said gently. "He will use the legal system to bury you. He'll say you stole the robot or that you faked the signature. Without a platform to stand on, you're just a girl with a piece of paper." I walked out of the clinic feeling the weight of the world. My grandfather was right. I couldn't win as a victim. If I walked into the Vane Tech headquarters now, security would toss me out before I could reach the elevator. I looked at my scarred hand. It was a reminder of the fire, but also a reminder of what I could endure. I went to a nearby convenience store, bought a plastic waterproof bag, and tucked the will and the SD card inside. I then went to a bus station and rented a long-term locker. I put the will inside and tucked the key into the lining of my shoe. I couldn't be Brielle Vane right now. I had to be someone else. I had to build a base, a name, and a fortune of my own. Only then would the will be a weapon instead of a target on my back. I had to learn how to be a predator. 1 month later, I hit rock bottom. Thaddeus hadn't just kicked me out. He had used his connections to freeze my old savings account, claiming I had misappropriated family funds. I was penniless. I found a job the only way I could, under a different name, working for a commercial cleaning crew. The irony was a bitter pill to swallow. My job was to clean the Vane Tech corporate headquarters. Every night at 10:00 p.m., I put on a gray jumpsuit and pushed a cart full of bleach and rags through the halls my grandfather had built. I scrubbed the floors of the lobby where a giant bronze statue of Sela's Vane stood. I polished the glass doors of offices I should have owned. One Tuesday, I was buffing the floor near the executive elevators when the doors slid open. Thaddeus and Zayla stepped out. They were dressed in clothes that cost more than a year of my salary. Zayla was laughing, waving a gold-plated phone. "And then he actually asked for a raise," Zayla giggled. "I told him he should be lucky we don't charge him for the air he breathes in here." Thaddeus chuckled, his eyes scanning the lobby. He looked right at me. My heart stopped. I looked down, hiding my face with my hair, scrubbing the floor with intensity. "Move the cart, girl," Thaddeus barked at me. He didn't recognize me. To him, I was just a ghost in a gray suit. I was part of the furniture. He stepped past, his expensive shoes clicking on the floor I had just polished. "This place is finally starting to run like a real business," he told Zayla. "No more innovation for the sake of humanity nonsense your grandfather loved, just pure profit." The rage that boiled up inside me was hotter than the fire I'd reached into. They were tearing down his legacy. They were turning a dream into a machine for greed. I gripped the handle of my mop so hard my scar throbbed. I didn't just want the money anymore. I wanted to see them lose everything. A week later, I was cleaning the executive boardroom. The trash cans were overflowing with discarded papers. Usually, I just dumped them into the bin, but a word on a blue folder caught my eye: Nanotech battery grid. I knew that project. My grandfather had been obsessed with it. It was a way to provide free, clean energy to small communities. I opened the folder. Inside was a brilliant proposal from a young developer named Leo. Across the front page, in my father's messy handwriting, was a big red X and the words, "Rejected. ROI too slow. No fast money." I sat on the floor of the darkened boardroom and read the whole thing. It was brilliant, but it had a flaw. My grandfather had taught me how to see the kinks in a circuit. Leo's design was missing a feedback loop that would prevent overheating. I took a pen from the desk, a pen with my father's initials on it, and began to sketch on the back of the proposal. My mind raced. I hadn't felt this alive in years. I stayed in that room for 3 hours, ignoring my cleaning rounds, redrawing the entire power flow schematic. I knew exactly what I had to do. I didn't dump the papers. I folded the modified proposal and hid it in my jumpsuit. During the day, while Cairo was at a low-cost daycare, I went to the public library. I didn't just read books. I studied the industry. I used my grandfather's engineering journals, the ones I had memorized as a teenager, to refine Leo's idea. I wasn't just fixing a battery, I was building a company. I decided to call the project the Phoenix. It was a bit on the nose, but it fit. Something born from the ashes of a fire. I just needed one person to believe in it, and I knew exactly who that was. Bishop was a man who looked like he was made of sharp angles and old secrets. He had been my grandfather's lead counsel for 30 years. He was the only person Thaddeus feared, which was why Thaddeus had fired him the day after the funeral. I found him in a small, dusty office in the basement of a brick building downtown. He was drinking lukewarm coffee and looking at a pile of old law books. When I walked in, he didn't recognize me at first. "We're closed for the day," he said without looking up. "Even for a Vane?" I asked. Bishop froze. He looked up, his eyes narrowing behind thick lenses. He stood up slowly, looking at my tired face, my cheap clothes, and finally the bandage on my hand. "Brielle," he whispered, "word on the street is you ran away. Your father said you took a payout and left the country." "My father is a liar, Bishop," I said. I sat down across from him and pulled out the waterproof bag. I didn't show him the will first. I showed him the modified battery proposal. I need to launch this. I need a partner who knows how to fight dirty and how to win. He looked at the blueprints. Being a tech lawyer, he understood enough to see the value. This is worth millions, he said. Maybe more, but Thaddeus will sue you the moment you go public. That's when I pulled out the will. Bishop's hands shook as he read it. He stayed silent for a long time. Then he looked at the microSD card. You've had this the whole time. I couldn't use it, I said. He has the power, I have nothing. I need to build a shield before I use this sword. Bishop smiled, a slow, predatory grin. If you strike Brielle, you have to kill the king. If you miss, he will destroy you in Cairo. Are you ready for that? Look at my hand, Bishop, I said, unwrapping the gauze to show him the raw, red scar. I've already been through the fire. I'm not afraid of the heat anymore. With a small loan that Bishop secured by leveraging some of his own remaining assets, we launched Novus Energy. We didn't use my name. On all the legal documents, the CEO was listed as B.V. Silas. It was a ghost name. We hired Leo, the developer whose proposal had been tossed in the trash. He was shocked to see his ideas improved. Who did this? He asked, looking at my sketches. A friend of the family, I told him. We worked out of a garage, just like my grandfather had. I spent my days pitching to small investors and my nights hand-soldering prototypes while Cairo slept on a cot in the corner. I was exhausted, my bones ached, and I missed having a real bed, but I felt a fire in my chest that kept me going. We didn't go for the big tech magazines first. We went for the green blogs and the independent engineering forums. We showed them a battery that could power a home for a week on a single charge and cost half as much as the competition. It went viral. In 3 months, Novus Energy went from a garage project to the most talked-about startup in the sector. People were calling it the vain tech killer. Orders started pouring in. We weren't just a nuisance anymore, we were a movement. I remember the night we hit $1 million in pre-orders. Bishop and I sat on the floor of the garage, sharing a cheap pizza. The world is noticing, Bishop warned, and that means Thaddeus is noticing. Good, I said, looking at a photo of my grandfather I had taped to the wall. I want him to see us coming. I want him to wonder who is stealing his kingdom. I was no longer the girl scrubbing floors. I was the architect of his downfall, but I knew the hardest part was just beginning. The higher we rose, the more Thaddeus would try to pull us down. Inside the glass and steel tower of Vain Tech, the atmosphere was frantic. I knew this because Bishop still had friends on the inside. Thaddeus was losing his mind. The stock for Vain Tech had dropped by 15% in a single week. Their own battery project, the one they had rushed to compete with us, was failing safety tests. It was expensive, clunky, and outdated. Who is this B.V. Silas? Thaddeus roared in a recorded board meeting Bishop played for me. I want a face. I want a history. Nobody comes out of nowhere and takes my market share. We're looking into it, Dad, Zayla's voice came through the speaker. She sounded bored but annoyed. It's probably some tech geek in a basement. We'll just sue them for patent infringement. We have enough lawyers to keep them in court until their grandkids are old. Do it, Thaddeus yelled. Find a weakness. I don't care if you have to invent one. I want this company dead by the end of the month. I sat in my new, modest office, listening to his rage. It was strange to hear his voice and not feel the immediate urge to hide. My fear was being replaced by a cold, calculating focus. He's going to come for us legally, Bishop said, leaning against the doorframe. He's already filed 3 cease and desist orders. He claims we stole proprietary concepts from Vain Tech. Which is a lie, I said. He rejected those concepts. Doesn't matter in court, Bishop reminded me. He has the money to make the truth irrelevant. We need a big win, Brielle, something he can't ignore. The International Tech Expo is next week, I said. Vain Tech is the lead sponsor. They're planning to unveil their new grid system there. You want to go? Bishop asked, surprised. He'll see you. I want him to see me, I said. But more importantly, I want the world to see the difference between a Vane who builds and a Vane who burns. The International Tech Expo was a sea of flashing lights, humming drones, and people in suits that cost more than my first car. I wore a sharp, navy blue blazer and kept my hair pulled back. I looked like a CEO. I felt like a warrior. I was standing near our booth, a modest but sleek display for Novus Energy, when I saw her. Zayla was walking down the main aisle, flanked by 2 assistants. She was wearing a dress that was far too flashy for a tech event, looking around like she owned the building. She stopped at our booth. She didn't look at the tech. She looked at me. At first, there was no recognition. She just saw a woman in a suit. "Is the owner here?" she asked, her voice dripping with condescension. "I have some legal papers for them." "I'm the CEO," I said, turning to face her fully. Zayla's eyes went wide. She blinked, her mouth falling open. "Brielle," she whispered. Then she started to laugh. It was a shrill, ugly sound. "Oh my God, you're the genius everyone is talking about, the girl who was scrubbing toilets a few months ago." "I learned a lot about how companies work while I was cleaning up after you, Zayla," I said calmly. "You look ridiculous," she mocked, gesturing to my suit. "Did you buy that at a thrift store, or did you steal it from a lost and found?" She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a hiss. "Dad is going to crush you. He's already talked to the judges. You're going to lose everything, your little company, your money, and probably that brat of a son, too." I didn't flinch, I just looked at her. "Tell Thaddeus I'm looking forward to the competition. And Zayla, you have some mustard on your chin." She reached up to wipe her face, her expression turning into a snarl when she realized I was lying. I walked away, my heart hammering. She was scared. I could see it in the way her hands shook. They weren't fighting a nobody anymore. They were fighting someone who knew exactly where they were vulnerable. The retaliation came fast. 2 days after the expo, I got a call from our manufacturer in Taiwan. "I'm sorry, Ms. Vane," the manager said, sounding genuinely upset. "We have to delay your order. All of our lines have been booked out for the next 6 months." "By who?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Vane Tech," he said. "They paid double our standard rate to lock us into an exclusive contract. We can't produce your batteries." It was a massive blow. We had 50,000 orders waiting to be shipped. If we missed our deadline, we would have to issue refunds. The refunds would drain our capital, and the company would fold before it even truly began. I sat in the dark garage, staring at the floor. Cairo came over and pulled on my sleeve. "Mom, do we have to go back to the motel? I don't like the smell there." I looked at him, then at the scar on my hand. Thaddeus was using his checkbook to choke us. He thought he could buy his way out of a fight. He thought money was the only thing that mattered. "No, Cairo," I said, my voice firm. "We aren't going back." I called Bishop and Leo. "We're changing the plan," I told them. "If we can't use the big factories, we do it ourselves. There are 3 smaller, independent labs in the city that are struggling. We buy their time. We rent their equipment. We hire the students from the local tech college." "That's crazy," Leo said. "We'd have to hand-assemble the first 10,000 units." "Then we hand-assemble them," I said. "I've spent the last few months scrubbing floors and soldering boards. I'm not afraid of work. Are you?" They looked at each other, then back at me. "Let's get to work," Leo said. The next 72 hours were a blur of caffeine, solder smoke, and aching muscles. We moved our operations to a small warehouse. I was on the line right alongside Leo and 20 college students we'd hired. My hands were cramped, and my back felt like it was made of glass, but we didn't stop. Every time I felt like quitting, I thought of Thaddeus sitting in his air-conditioned office, laughing about how he'd fixed the problem. Bishop was there too, surprisingly. He wasn't great with a soldering iron, but he kept the coffee flowing and handled the logistics, making sure the parts were delivered on time. The press got wind of what we were doing. A local news crew showed up, filming us working in the middle of the night. They called it the David versus Goliath of tech, the story of a small startup fighting a giant that was trying to bully them into silence. The grit of our team became a selling point. Our customers didn't cancel their orders, they doubled down. They wanted to support the underdog. By the morning of the deadline, the last truck was loaded. 10,000 units, hand-checked and ready to go. We had made it. I stood on the loading dock, watching the truck pull away. I was covered in grease and dust. My eyes were red from lack of sleep, but I felt more powerful than I ever had in my life. Our stock didn't just rise, it soared. Investors who had been afraid to talk to us were now blowing up my phone. We had proven we couldn't be broken by money alone. We had something Thaddeus didn't, a purpose. But as the sun rose, Bishop walked up to me with a grim look on his face. "He's not done, Brielle. An animal is most dangerous when it's cornered, and you just backed Thaddeus into a very dark corner." The call came an hour later. It wasn't a legal threat. It was an invitation. "My father wants to see the CEO of Novus Energy," Zayla's voice said over the phone. She sounded different now, less mocking, more desperate. "He wants to discuss a buyout, a very generous one. He's inviting you to the Vane Tech headquarters at 2:00 p.m. "I'll be there," I said. I didn't go in my work clothes. I went back to the motel, took a long shower, and put on my best suit. I spent a long time looking at the scar on my hand in the mirror. It was a mark of shame to my father, but to me, it was a medal of honor. Walking into the Vane Tech building was a surreal experience. The security guards who had once ignored me while I emptied their trash now held the doors open for me. I rode the executive elevator to the top floor, the floor I used to scrub at 3:00 a.m. I walked into my father's office. It was exactly as I remembered it, cold, expensive, and filled with the smell of old leather and ego. Thaddeus was sitting behind his desk, looking out the window. Zayla was standing by the bar, nursing a drink. "Sit down," Thaddeus said without turning around. "I must admit I'm impressed. You've caused quite a stir for a nobody." He turned his chair around. When his eyes landed on me, he didn't speak. He didn't move. He just stared. His face turned a ghostly shade of white. "You," he whispered. "Hello, Dad," I said, sitting down in the chair across from him. I didn't wait for an invitation. "I believe you wanted to talk business." Zayla dropped her glass. It shattered on the floor, the liquid soaking into the rug. "Brielle, how are you the CEO?" "I built it," I said, looking her in the eye. "While you were spending Dad's money, I was using the brain Grandpa gave me." Thaddeus recovered his composure quickly. That was his talent. He could hide his shock behind a wall of arrogance. He leaned back in his chair and let out a short, dry laugh. Well, he said. "The prodigal daughter returns. I have to admit, Brielle, I didn't think you had it in you. You actually made a few bucks with that little battery project. It's cute." "It's more than cute, Thaddeus," I said. "It's the future of the industry, and your company is the past." He waved a hand dismissively. "Don't get ahead of yourself. You've had a lucky run, but you're playing in the big leagues now. You don't have the infrastructure to scale. I do." He pushed a folder across the desk. "I'm prepared to offer you $50 million for Novus Energy. It's more money than you'll ever see in your life. You can take Cairo, buy a nice house somewhere far away, and I'll even let you come to Christmas dinner this year. We can put this little disagreement behind us." He said it like he was doing me a favor. Like $50 million was a gift from a king to a peasant. I didn't even look at the folder. I pushed it back toward him. "I don't want your money, Thaddeus, and I certainly don't want a seat at your table." "Don't be a fool," he snapped, his temper beginning to flare. "This is your one chance to get out before I decide to play rough." "You've already played rough," I said, leaning in. "You tried to burn my son's toy. You kicked us onto the street. You tried to choke my manufacturing. And yet, here I am. I'm not selling to you. In fact, I'm doing the opposite." "What are you talking about?" Zayla asked, her voice trembling. "I'm not looking for a payout," I said. "I'm looking for a takeover. I don't want a seat at your table, Thaddeus. I'm buying the restaurant." I stood up and walked out. I could hear him screaming my name, but I didn't look back. The war was officially on. The next morning, the headlines were brutal. "Is the CEO of Novus Energy unstable? The dark past of betrayal Vane, from wealth to the streets. Thaddeus had launched a smear campaign. He had leaked stories to every tabloid and tech blog that would listen. They claimed I was mentally unstable, that I had been cut off because of drug use, a complete lie, and that I had stolen intellectual property from my father's safe to start my company. It was a dirty, low blow, but it wasn't just the news. That afternoon, I went to pick up Cairo from his school. There were paparazzi at the gate. They shoved cameras in his face, asking him if his mom was a thief. Cairo was crying, hiding his face in his backpack. I felt a surge of pure, unadulterated rage. He could come for me all he wanted, but when he brought my son into it, he crossed a line he couldn't uncross. "We need to move, Cairo," I said, ushering him into the car. "Why are they being mean, Mommy?" he asked. "Did we do something bad?" "No, baby," I said, gripping the steering wheel. "We did something good, and when you do something good, bad people try to make you look small." Our stock began to wobble. Investors don't like drama, and my father was creating a circus. Some of our board members were getting nervous. They wanted me to release a statement to fight back. "No," I told Bishop. "If we fight him in the press, we're just playing his game. We need to fight him where he's weakest." "And where is that?" Bishop asked. "His wallet," I said. "He's spending millions on this smear campaign. He's spending millions to block our manufacturing. He's bleeding money to keep us down. We just need to find out how much he has left." Bishop spent the next week diving into the dark corners of Vane Tech's financial records. Because he had been the company's lawyer for so long, he knew where the bodies were buried, and more importantly, he knew the account numbers. We met at a late-night diner, the kind with sticky menus and bad coffee. Bishop laid out a series of spreadsheets. "It's worse than I thought," he said. "Vane Tech isn't just failing, it's hollow. Thaddeus has been embezzling millions to cover Zayla's gambling debts in Macau. He's also made a string of terrible investments in get-rich-quick tech that never materialized." "How long can they stay afloat?" I asked. "If the stock keeps dropping, not long. They're relying on a massive loan from a foreign conglomerate that's set to close next month. If that loan doesn't go through, the company will be forced into a fire sale." I looked at the numbers. The company my grandfather had built, a multi-billion-dollar empire, was being bled dry by my father's greed. It was like watching a beautiful ship being stripped for parts by its own captain. "He's desperate," I realized. "That's why he tried to buy me out. He needed Novus Energy's patents to convince the bank that Vane Tech still has a future." "Exactly," Bishop said. "He's a cornered animal, but he's also vulnerable. If someone were to start buying up Vane Tech stock while it's low." "He wouldn't notice," I finished. "He's too busy looking at the headlines he created." "It's a huge risk, Brielle," Bishop warned. "If we use our capital to buy his stock and the company fails anyway, we lose everything. We'll be back on the street." I thought about the motel. I thought about the smell of the rain. Then I thought about the wills sitting in that locker at the bus station. "He's already destroyed the company's soul," I said. "I'm just going to take back the body. Let's do it." I had to play a part. To make Thaddeus think he had won, I had to act like I was breaking. I called a press conference. I made sure I looked tired. I wore a sweater that looked a bit too big, and I didn't wear any makeup. I stood in front of the microphones and told the world that I was stepping down from Novus Energy to focus on my mental health and my family. "The pressure has been too much," I said, my voice shaking partly for the cameras and partly because I was terrified. "I just want peace." The headlines changed instantly. BRILLE Vane CRUMBLES. THADDUS Vane proven right. I heard through Bishop that Thaddeus threw a party at the mansion that night. He thought he had cleared the board. He thought I was gone. In reality, I was working 16 hours a day in a windowless room with Bishop. We were liquidating every asset Novus Energy had. We were taking out loans against our future earnings. Through a series of shell corporations, names like Sela's Holdings and Robot One Ventures, we were quietly buying every single share of Vane Tech that hit the market. Because the news was so bad, people were selling their shares for pennies on the dollar. They thought the ship was sinking. We were the only ones holding the buckets. "We're at 30%, Bishop whispered one night. Then 40%. "We need 51, I said. "We need total control. If he has even a sliver of power left, he'll find a way to burn it all down just to spite me." We were running out of money. I had even pawned the jewelry my grandfather had given me years ago. We were on the edge of the cliff. Then Thaddeus made his final move. He announced an emergency shareholder meeting. He was going to sell the entire company to a foreign conglomerate to save what was left. It was a fire sale. He was going to take the cash and run, leaving thousands of employees with nothing. "It's now or never," Bishop said. "We have to move." The day of the emergency meeting was gray and heavy, with the threat of snow. I went to the bus station and opened the locker. The will was still there. I took it out and held it for a moment. This piece of paper had been through a fire. It had been hidden in a toy, forgotten by a man who only saw trash. "Today, Grandpa," I whispered. "Today we go home." The shareholder meeting was held in the grand ballroom of a luxury hotel. Thaddeus wanted it to be a spectacle. He wanted to show everyone that he was the savior who was cashing out at the right time. The room was packed with wealthy investors, reporters, and the board of directors. Thaddeus stood on the stage, looking smug. Zayla was in the front row, wearing a fur coat and a diamond necklace, looking like she'd already spent her share of the sale. "Ladies and gentlemen," Thaddeus said, his voice booming through the speakers. "Vane Tech has a long history, but to survive in today's market, we must evolve. This sale to the Global Star Group will ensure that the Vane legacy continues, even if the name changes." He was lying. Global Star was known for stripping companies and firing everyone. He was selling his father's life's work to a chop shop. "The board has already approved the motion," Thaddeus continued, his eyes gleaming. "We just need to finalize the shareholder vote. As the majority holder of the Vane Family Trust, I cast my vote for the sale." He picked up a pen, ready to sign the document that would end Vane Tech forever. "Wait," a voice rang out from the back of the room. The doors swung open. I walked in. This time I wasn't wearing a tired sweater. I was wearing a black suit, sharp as a razor. Behind me were Bishop and 4 security guards in suits. "The majority shareholder hasn't voted yet," I said, my voice steady and clear. The room went deathly silent. Every camera turned toward me. The flashbulbs were like lightning strikes. Thaddeus's face went from smug to purple in 3 seconds. He gripped the edge of the podium so hard I thought the wood might crack. "You," he hissed, the microphone picking up his whisper. "I told security you were banned from this building. Get her out of here." 2 security guards started toward me, but Bishop stepped forward, holding up a stack of legal documents. "Stop right there," Bishop commanded. His voice had that old authority back. "We have filed the official disclosure with the SEC this morning. My client, Brielle Vane, through her holdings, currently owns 51% of the voting stock of Vane Tech." A collective gasp went up from the crowd. The reporters started typing furiously. "That's impossible," Zayla screamed from the front row, standing up. "She's broke, she's a dropout, she can't own anything." "Check the ledger, Zayla," I said, walking down the center aisle. I didn't stop until I was at the foot of the stage, looking up at my father. "You were so busy trying to ruin my reputation that you didn't notice I was buying your company. You sold your shares to investors to pay for your debts. Well, I'm the investor." Thaddeus was shaking. "It doesn't matter," he stammered, trying to regain control. "I still run the board, I'm the CEO, you can't just walk in here and—" "Actually," Bishop interrupted, "as the majority shareholder, Brielle has the right to call an immediate vote of no confidence. And considering the embezzlement we've uncovered and the fraud you've committed, I think the board will be very interested in what she has to say." I stepped up onto the stage. I didn't wait for Thaddeus to move. I walked right to the podium and pushed him aside. He stumbled, looking like an old, weak man for the first time in his life. I looked out at the room. 3 years ago, I began, my father told me that value is only found in things that are expensive. He told me that my grandfather's work was trash. I reached into my bag. I pulled out the melted, charred robot and placed it on the sleek, polished wood of the conference table. It looked hideous in the bright lights, a lump of blackened plastic and twisted copper. "This is a toy," I said. "My father threw this into a fire to hurt my son. He thought it was worthless." The crowd was leaning in, confused. Thaddeus was glaring at the robot like it was a ghost. "But my grandfather, Silas Vane, didn't build toys," I continued. "He built legacies. He knew that the people who only look at the surface are the ones who are truly blind." I signaled to the tech booth at the back. "Play the file." The giant screen behind me flickered to life. My grandfather's face appeared, 10 feet tall. The room went silent. Some of the older board members, men who had known Silas for 40 years, looked like they were seeing a miracle. "I, Silas Vane, being of sound mind," my grandfather's voice filled the ballroom, "hereby declare that my son, Thaddeus, is unfit to lead this company. He lacks the vision, the empathy, and the integrity required. Therefore, I leave the entirety of my estate and my controlling shares to my granddaughter, Brielle Vane." The video showed the robot. It showed Silas placing the will inside the fireproof cylinder. "I hide this here," he said with a wink, "because Thaddeus has never valued anything he couldn't sell. He will never find it." I looked at Thaddeus. He was leaning against the wall, his mouth open. The video played the part where Silas spoke about the morally bankrupt nature of his son. It was a public execution of his character. "The document inside this robot," I said, holding up the parchment, "is the true will. It has been verified by forensic experts this morning. Thaddeus Vane never inherited this company. He stole it. Every contract he signed, every asset he sold, and every dollar he spent was done under false pretenses." "It's a lie," Thaddeus roared, but his voice was thin. "She faked it. It's a deep fake." "The police are already in the back of the room, Thaddeus," Bishop said, "and they have the original will." The doors at the back opened again. This time, it wasn't my security. It was the police. Since Thaddeus had managed the company under a fraudulent claim of inheritance and had purposefully destroyed legal documents, or tried to, he was facing multiple felony charges. The embezzlement records Bishop had found were just the icing on the cake. Zayla tried to sneak out the side door, but a female officer intercepted her. "Miss Vane, we need to talk to you about some offshore accounts." Thaddeus looked at the cameras, then at the board members who were now looking at him with pure hatred. He had lied to them for years. He had almost ruined their fortunes. The police walked onto the stage. One of them, a stern-looking man, pulled out a pair of handcuffs. "Thaddeus Vane, you're under arrest for corporate fraud, embezzlement, and destruction of legal evidence." "You can't do this," Thaddeus screamed, struggling as they pulled his arms behind his back. "I'm the CEO. I'm the head of this family." He looked at me, his eyes wide and desperate. "Brielle, tell them I'm your father. You can't do this to your own father." I walked over to him. I didn't feel angry anymore. I just felt a deep, cold pity. I held up my right hand, showing him the scar that ran across my palm. "A father protects his child, Thaddeus," I said quietly. "You only protected your wallet. You threw us into the fire. I just decided to walk out of it." As they led him away in cuffs, the room erupted into chaos. Reporters were shouting questions, and board members were trying to shake my hand. I ignored them all. I picked up the melted robot and held it to my chest. "We're going home, Cairo," I whispered. The fallout was massive. For the next month, the news was nothing but the Vane scandal. Thaddeus was denied bail because of his flight risk. Zayla was forced to sell everything she owned, the jewelry, the cars, the designer clothes, to pay for her own legal defense. She ended up in a small apartment on the outskirts of the city, the very kind of place she used to mock me for living in. I was officially named CEO of the newly merged Vane Novus Industries. My first act was to cancel the sale to Global Star. My second act was to give a raise to every employee who had been threatened with a layoff. It wasn't easy. The company was in a hole, and I had to work 18-hour days to pull us out. But I wasn't scrubbing floors anymore. I was rebuilding a dream. Bishop became my chief operating officer. Leo became our head of R&D. We took the Phoenix battery and made it the core of the company. We moved away from fast money and back to innovation for humanity, just like my grandfather wanted. I moved back into the estate, but I changed it. I tore down the cold, stiff furniture and filled the rooms with light and books. I turned my father's sculpture garden into a playground for Cairo. One afternoon, I sat in the library where this all began. The fireplace was cold. I looked at the spot where I had reached into the flames. My hand still ached sometimes when it rained, but it was a good ache. It reminded me that I was real, that I had survived. I had reclaimed my name, my fortune, and my family's legacy. But more importantly, I had shown my son that no matter how much someone tries to burn you, you can always rise from the ashes. 6 months later, the company was thriving. We had just won the Green Tech of the Year award. The stock was higher than it had been in 20 years. I went to visit Thaddeus in prison. I didn't have to go, but I wanted to close the book. He looked different. He was wearing a plain orange jumpsuit. His hair was graying, and he looked smaller, like a balloon that had lost all its air. We sat on opposite sides of a glass partition. "Are you happy now?" he asked, his voice raspy. "You have the money, you have the house, you win." "It was never about winning, Dad," I said. "It was about justice. It was about Cairo." "I did what I had to do to keep the company strong," he lied. He still couldn't admit he was wrong. "My father was a dreamer. Dreamers get crushed. I was a realist." "No," I said. "You were a thief. You stole 3 years of my life. You stole a childhood from Cairo. But you know what's funny? If you had just been a father, I would have given you everything. I would have helped you save the company. You didn't have to burn me to be powerful." He looked away, unable to meet my eyes. "I'm renaming the company," I told him. "It's not Vane Tech anymore. It's Sila's and Cairo Industries. Your name isn't on the building anymore, Thaddeus. It's been erased." That was the only thing that actually hurt him. I saw his jaw tighten. To a man like him, being forgotten was worse than being imprisoned. "Goodbye, Thaddeus," I said. I stood up and walked away, not looking back at the man who had tried to destroy me. I had a life to live, and he was no longer a part of it. The sun was setting over the city, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, colors that reminded me of a fire, but a beautiful one this time. I walked into our home. Cairo was in the living room playing with a new robot. This one was sleek, silver, and could fly. It was the latest prototype from the lab, and he loved it. But on the mantel, right above the fireplace, sat a glass display case. Inside, it was the melted, charred, blackened robot from the past. It looked out of place in the beautiful room, but it was the most important thing we owned. "Mom, look," Cairo shouted, making the new robot do a flip. I sat down on the rug next to him and ruffled his hair. "That's amazing, buddy." "Grandpa would have liked this one, right?" he asked. "He would have loved it," I said, "but he loved the old one more, because that one showed us who we really are." I looked at the glass case. The scar on my hand was faint now, a silvery line across my palm. It didn't represent pain anymore, it represented power. It was the mark of a woman who had lost everything and found something better, herself. We were safe, we were whole, and the trash my father had thrown away had become the foundation of a billion-dollar future. I picked up a book and started to read to my son, the sound of his laughter filling the house. The fire was out, the smoke had cleared, and for the first time in my life I could finally breathe.